This month we're going to be painting poppies, and I really love poppies. They're bright, summery colors. I'm going to start with quinacridone rose. And I'm going to start by painting a forward-facing poppy. They kind of have these ruffly petals. So I'm just kind of wiggling my brush back and forth to create that ruffled edge. I'm being careful not to go completely to the center. Not a big deal if you do. But I'm trying to avoid the center just so I can easily add that yellow center. If you paint it all the way to the center, you could always add that yellow center with gouache. That's going to sit on top of your watercolor. Or you could always start with the yellow center, which maybe I'll do over here to show you two different ways you could do this. And you just want to choose the way that feels the most comfortable for you. So I'm painting Icelandic poppies, which have that bright yellow center. There are also the poppies that have a dark black center. So it's totally up to you what you want to do. With my size 0 brush, I'm going to go in and paint these tiny little lines to kind of connect the stamen to the center. Okay, and then I'm going to let that dry for just a moment. We're going to move on to our 3/4 facing poppy. And I'm going to paint this one in like a more bright orange color. And I'll do the same thing where I start with the petals and then start with the center. So I'm painting that backmost petal. And then these are going to be shorter along this side because you're seeing the back of that petal and then you're not seeing quite as much of this side. And then over here, we'll start with the center. So I'm painting these essentially the same way, except for the circle that surrounds that very center has just kind of shifted up. Now this is dried, so I'm going to go in with my yellow center. I could paint a little bit larger on the center if I used gouache, because that gouache is going to go right over the top of the watercolor paint. It's got a more opaque quality to it. It acts a lot like watercolor, except for that it doesn't have that transparency. Okay, now I'm going to go back in and add just a little bit of shading so that this doesn't look completely flat. I just used the same color that I did to paint it originally so that there wouldn't be a ton of contrast. If you want more contrast, you'd just use a darker color on top. All right, and this has had a chance to dry, so now I'm going to go in and add my petals. Try both of these methods and see which one you prefer. Sometimes, especially when you're painting in compositions, it'll make more sense to paint all of the centers first, and then in some other cases, it'll make more sense to paint the petals first. I can already tell that I've painted these a little bit too close together, but that's okay. We'll just have them overlap a little bit. So I'm painting that back petal. And then the side petals. And then that front petal. I'll go back in and add some definition once those have dried. I'm going to wait and add the green center in just a moment. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to do a side-facing peony. A side-facing poppy. Why can't I say the name? Using shell pink and a little bit of that orange to create a light peach color. Now, side-facing poppies, you're only going to see the petals. You're not going to see the center at all. We'll go back in and add some definition to that in just a moment. I decided this was a little bit too dark, so I'm just rinsing my brush to help blend that out a little bit more. Now here, the definition that I'm creating is just around the inside. I'm allowing the edges of the flower to look like it's curled up a little bit. I'm going to go in with a slightly darker color over here. And then just add in a little bit of shading right here along the bottom. I'm also going to paint a little poppy pod so you can see what those look like. Of course, this is stylized, but they're just these little green ovals connected to a stem, and then they kind of have this center part right here on the top. Those are kind of fun to add into compositions.